Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and the 2025 NFL season is officially over. Not because San Francisco lost against Seattle, but because Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have provided us and given their season-ending press conferences. There was a ton of information, injury updates on Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Michael Williams, got into the actual cause of the injuries today, and if San Francisco plans to make a change on the training staff, and we'll see about that one. We also got some news on Mac Jones and Jauan Jennings' future with the team. And on top of that, and maybe even more importantly, the San Francisco 49ers finally admitted their weakness and gave us more intel into who they're searching for as their next defensive coordinator. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Happy Wednesday to you, Jesus, in the YouTube chat. And let's get this show on the road because we have a ton to cover today on the 49er Access podcast. Again, should be a doozy and can't wait to dive into this with you. And let's start at the very top. Probably the most obvious information that you and I already knew, and that is that Brandon Aiyuk has played his last snap with the San Francisco 49ers. Didn't play a single snap all year. He was hurt, copped a fit, then he quit. With all that in mind, he will not be a San Francisco 49er in 2026, 27, 28, and really ever again, which, again, shouldn't be a shock because he quit on this team, which desperately needed a player like him down the stretch in the playoff run. But the quote going around social media today is via general manager John Lynch, who said, "I think it's safe to say that Brandon Aiyuk has played his last snap with the San Francisco 49ers. Later in their press conference, they were asked, what exactly went wrong? When did it go wrong? Now, we have some intel regarding, there was communication breakdown, this, that, and the other, and that all happened during the summertime and basically in the first month of the NFL season. But when asked further about, can you provide more information, Lynch said, and I quote, "I wish I knew. I can't help you there." And Kyle Shanahan said, "That's something I'd never seen in 22 years of coaching." And towards the end of his quote, he said, "We're still trying to understand it." Man, it's tough because I'm not in that room, and I feel like even if I was, I wouldn't be obliged to ask a question. No, I'm not one of the big dogs, obviously, in Niner media, but I have been in that room. And I would have loved someone to say, you paid a guy $120 million after a long, grueling negotiation. At some point, do you feel like you've been had? That you got, you had a thief in your ranks? That you got burnt by a dude that maybe doesn't ever play in the NFL again? You talk about the mistakes this team has made, signing guys, trading guys, acquiring players, draft picks, whatever. There are a lot of stains on this very successful regime docket. And this is one of the biggest ones. A guy who you drafted, who you got behind, who you stood by. And we all know the story now. Shanahan runs upstairs and, calls off a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers, which in retrospect, wouldn't you love a second-round draft pick now and Calvin Austin III? I mean, man, hindsight's 2020. But I can almost guarantee you, if you ask San Francisco, would you make a trade for anything? 6th-round pick, 7th-round draft pick? They'd say yes. Now, we don't know exactly when or what San Francisco will do with Brandon Aiyuk this offseason, whether it's a trade, unlikely, or releasing, which feels like the likely option here, and whether it's a post-June 1st release, a pre-June 1st designation, that all depends on the cap stuff. So things are tricky, but we know that now Brandon Aiyuk is not going to be a San Francisco 49er ever again, and maybe someone takes a chance on him, but the way things ended, it'd be different if you heard something from Brandon Aiyuk, because most guys that want to put up a fight, most guys that, want to defend themselves, Antonio Brown, all of his troubles, and probably isn't a great guy, he still was vocal and defended himself. Le'Veon Bell, during his holdout year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, was talking the entire time about wanting to play in the NFL for somebody else. There are countless examples of star wide receivers that don't want to play with the current team, vocal on social media or, to the media itself, reporters and everything, saying like, I would like to play somewhere else. Brandon Aiyuk hasn't said a single word. I don't know if Brandon Aiyuk even wants to play football again, which also might make things worse for San Francisco, knowing you paid that guy $120 million. And yeah, you got some back because you avoided his guarantees, but you paid a guy $120 million who may not even want to play the sport you paid him to play for you. Whether it makes him look worse, I have no idea. Was the writing on the wall for a long time? Maybe so, right? Sometimes you can look back at signs and go, how'd you not notice this? But I think in the thick of things, we all said this team is better with Aiyuk on it, and it just kind of becomes one of the bigger what-ifs of this Shanahan and Lynch regime, which has plenty of those already, right? Big losses, Trey Lance. Now Brandon Aiyuk finds himself somewhere near the top of that list because, my goodness, this was an utter disaster from the jump. Great player for 4 years, deserved to get paid, and just quit. Which sometimes the regime's hands are tied. Maybe something comes out in the future that changes my mind, but Aiyuk looks like the villain here, and I know San Francisco definitely played a part in things, but again, you would like him to at least stand up for himself, and when you don't do that, it likely means you're guilty. But moving on to the future. Brandon Aiyuk is in the past, which is crazy to say, but he's in the past now, right? The future, right? And one of the biggest things San Francisco has to address this offseason is, for the 5th time in 5 years, trying to find their next defensive coordinator. Now, keep in mind, Kyle and John cannot discuss other coaches on other teams that are under contract. So you mentioned Jim Schwartz, Brian Flores, who will go back to the Vikings as reported by Adam Schefter, so he's off the list. But guys like that you think could be a fit in San Francisco, they can't mention. It's tampering. You do that, you get fined, you can lose draft picks. They can only talk about the guys in their building. And when asked today about who they're looking for, what kind of guy you looking for, are you looking for a different scheme? The quote was, Gus Bradley is the quote-unquote main internal candidate for the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator job. Now, again, that could just mean the internal guy, and they're going to have this extended long search for a DC, and it'll involve names like Raheem Morris and Gary Unland or excuse me, Corey Unland and guys like that. Like, this could just simply be, that's the guy in the building. That's all we can talk about. He didn't mention KJ Wright. He didn't mention other guys like that. So it kind of feels like that Bradley is the only guy in the building they truly believe is going to be the internal candidate for San Francisco in 2025, which doesn't shock me at all. If you watched yesterday's show, we discussed the candidates for the DC job, and we landed on Gus Bradley being the safe, kind of boring pick, but one Kyle's pretty comfortable making, and that may be what happens this offseason. That said, it wasn't the only thing Kyle mentioned, but he also contradicted himself because he was discussing, would you change schemes? Would you do something different, right? Many people out there want Jim Schwartz, and although it's similar in ways to the wide 9 cover 3, there is differences involved. And what Shanahan said was he wants dynamic coverages and fronts, but calling Gus Bradley the main internal candidate doesn't make sense. I don't think the phrase dynamic coverages and fronts is what you normally put next to a coach like Gus Bradley. He is a, slam it down into the hole and just call cover 3 95% of the time. You go back to his time in Jacksonville, Seattle, and also with the Colts most recent, cover 3, and that's all it is. Now, again, there is more wrinkles to that, but it's very rare. You're not going to see Saleh and other guys out there that are going to change things up and call quarters and call cover 1 and cover 3 and cover 6. It's very much cover 3, and we'll see how things play out. And Kyle mentioned when you're facing quarterbacks like Stafford and you have other high-powered offenses like the Rams or others in the NFC West, you have to get dynamic in your coverages. So why'd you mention the guy who's not dynamic in his coverages? Which that could mean, Kyle kind of talking at both ends of his mouth, which isn't new, or that to me, because Gus Bradley in recent years, when you talk about his defenses and the passer rating against, in 2021, ranked 25th, 2022, ranked 30th, 2023, ranked 13th, 2024, ranked 23rd. And this past year with San Francisco, ranked 26th. There's context involved for sure, but the gist I got listening to Kyle was, yeah, Gus is here. We like him a lot. That's the only guy we'll look at in the building. But if you're going to go outside, it made me think of Raheem Morris. We obviously know Kyle and Raheem have a great relationship with Washington, Tampa Bay, and all their time with the McVay coaching tree, the Shanahan coaching tree. He's discussed at length of how much he likes Raheem Morris as a DC and a coach overall, and I think that is what I got from listening to Kyle today. It wasn't like, oh, Gus Bradley's the guy, it's guaranteed. It was, if we can, we're going to try to bring in Raheem Morris. He's a guy who was learning Tampa 2 under Monty Kiffin with the Buccaneers, went to Washington for a little bit of time, learned that Seattle 3 coverage with Dan Quinn in Atlanta, then obviously has a hybrid of that with the Rams in recent seasons and now with the Falcons, now fired. I didn't get Gus Bradley as like the ding, 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 that's the winner. What I got was Raheem Morris as the external candidate we like, and Gus is the guy inside the building we like. Now, maybe I'm wrong, which wouldn't be new, but based on the hints I could gather, it doesn't sound like that the Browns are going to let Jim Schwartz go. Their 2 finalists for their job are right now listed as 2 offensive-minded guys, so that would likely include Schwartz staying in Cleveland, which means San Francisco has a dwindling list of defensive coordinator options, Raheem Morris and Gus Bradley being probably the top 2 guys on that list that Shanahan likes and knows, but you may have to start learning the Gus Bradley book. If you are a Niner fan, we have some comments in here by Papa J saying, "What's up, Sterling?" And in Gus, we trust. I don't think we trust in Gus Bradley that much, if we're being honest, but I'm sure Kyle Shanahan does. And then JReg1612 says, "I'm here for the Sterling algorithm." Well, thank you, JReg. I appreciate that. Happy to have you on a Wednesday night. And Papa J says, "If it wasn't for the algo, Sterling would have no rhythm at all." Okay, you can see yourself out now, Papa J. I may not have that much rhythm, but we got a little bit in here. Not a lot, but a little bit. My mother's a great dancer. At least she was when she was younger, so maybe I have a little bit there to offer. But no, thank you guys so much for being here tonight on a Wednesday. Bobo says here in the YouTube chat, Bobo being one of the regulars here, thank you so much for watching, Bobo. They say, make Jim Schwartz the highest paid DC. Why? Because he knows how to destroy Kyle's offense like Mike McDonald. Yeah, that depends on if Jim Schwartz wants to leave. I know sometimes, like for agency, we say, go get that guy. Sometimes that guy don't want to be here. And that can make things tough. And I think San Francisco would like to have Jim Schwartz in the building. Why wouldn't you? But sometimes things have to fall and break your way. I think it was Richard Sherman today or yesterday on his podcast said that he believes San Francisco wants to bring in Jim Schwartz. That'd be awesome. Now, we talked a couple days ago, you got to improve your safety room, which you already have to do because they're pretty bad. But under Jim Schwartz, it is a pin your ears back and go, 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 go at the quarterback. And, when that's the case, you got to have better coverage players, and San Francisco lacks a lot of those dudes right now. So I wouldn't hate it, obviously. I like Jim Schwartz a lot. He would be what you'd hope to become the C. Spagnuolo of the Shanahan coaching tree, if you will. And Kyle, it does seem like needs to find that guy, really needs to find that guy to kind of pair with, because unfortunately you're getting picked dry of coaches on a consistent basis. And when you do that, I'm sure like Kyle would agree, he's getting tired of finding new defensive coordinators each year. And you had D'Amico or D'Amico, and you had Saleh, and in between, things really just didn't work very well. And so you want to avoid having to keep searching for the next Saleh, the next D'Amico Ryans. So Schwartz definitely an option. He doesn't seem like somebody that would get a head coaching opportunity, or at least would be a hot name on the market. But hey, that's where the NFL goes, and if they can bring him in, that'd be awesome. You finally have a DC, or at least you get another DC that can be one of those big schematic mismatches for you. So we'll see, Bobo. James Schwartz is probably the only guy I'd break the bank for. I'm not breaking the bank for Gus Bradley. I'm not doing it for Raheem Morris. And obviously Flores is staying put either in Minnesota or going to get a head coaching job with the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Ravens. So we'll see how things progress as the offseason goes. But Papa J also asks here, Sterling, wasn't it Kyle's idea to bring in Bill Belichick as a head coach and have Kyle step down for the OC? Could you see that being a possibility? I don't think Kyle offered to step down. I think Kyle wanted Bill to become the defensive coordinator. And Kyle would remain the de facto OC and the head coach, which I don't think Bill wanted to be questioned. Bill was like, I'm beneath being a DC. I'm the greatest head coach of all time, or at least one of the greatest head coaches of all time. I think that was the agreement that Kyle wanted to have in place, but Bill was like, I'm going to go to North Carolina with my hot girlfriend, make a bunch of money, and then probably get fired in a year. So it doesn't seem like Bill had any interest in doing so, which may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing. I'm not sure who it was here in the chat a couple of days ago or yesterday that brought up Pete Carroll as an option. And I think, it'd be a big jump for somebody like KJ Wright to get the defensive coordinator job, but you already have Gus Bradley in the building. You already say you want to promote Wright, who, is a very young coach and probably isn't ready just yet. But if you're going to do that and let's say take a risk on somebody you hope to be here for the next 3 or 4 seasons, why wouldn't you bring in Pete Carroll as some sort of advisor to him? You have Pete Carroll, who was on that Seattle coaching staff, was the head coach that won a Super Bowl out there in Seattle. You would have Gus Bradley, who was in that building as his defensive coach in Seattle for a short period of time. Then you'd have KJ Wright, who was playing linebacker for that Seattle defense. Why wouldn't you want to do that? See, Bobo, I said bring in Pete Carroll, and you told me stop smoking crack. I meant as a defensive coordinator, not as an advisor. Very different things. It'd be almost exactly what Fangio did with San Francisco a couple years back, very hands-off, almost like if you have questions, come to me. As a defensive coordinator, no, I wouldn't do that. I think Pete's lost his fastball. But as an advisor, Pete probably wants to be around football. He's an older guy. He loves the game. I think he'd want to pay things forward, and having your former, defensive-minded coach in the building, and Gus Bradley, and also having a former player of his in the building, which could be San Francisco's next defensive coordinator, could make some sense in a kind of grand picture kind of scheme of things. So no, Bobo, don't smoke crack if you mean as an advisor, but smoke crack if you mean as a defensive coordinator. We have a question. I don't want to botch your name, so I'm just going to say it's Chua. I hope that's right. If not, correct me in the comments below. Great question here. We have more. There's a rumor around right now that San Francisco is eyeing or wanting to trade for Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison. I don't believe those rumors. The source definitely is reason to question, but maybe it's right. So with that said, a question by Chua, I believe, says, Sterling, what is your thoughts about the Vikings won't pick up Jordan Addison's 5th-year option? Would you trade for him? I like Jordan Addison, the player. I think he's explosive. I think he offers exactly what this team needs on the offensive side of things, especially if you're going to lose Jauan Jennings in the offseason, which we'll get to that in a second here on the show. My main concern, one, is he's not under contract, I believe, past next season, 2026, I believe. So right there in itself, you don't have longevity. You don't have young guys under roster control. And the last thing San Francisco wants to do is have a wide receiver ball out and say, pay me. You just did that. You want to avoid that if possible. That said, the other part of this is Jordan Addison has had a lot of arrests I believe he's been arrested 3 times in the past 2 seasons. One of them was minor. He just didn't want to leave a restaurant. He was told to. But the other big one was a DUI last year, which he got popped 3 games for. So you have a team like San Francisco who's had some head cases of wide receivers, Debo for a short period of time, now Aiyuk. You probably want to avoid, or at least you want to steer clear of some red flags that young wide receivers have. I'm a little hesitant to buy into San Francisco drafting a wide receiver in the first round while also in return playing them and believing in them and relying on them. In that same year, Kyle's pretty fickle in his process of young wide receivers. So I would say no on Jordan Addison simply because there's character concerns and you want longevity. You want to keep the cost of young guys down while you have to pay Kittle, Warner, Purdy, and obviously Nick Bosa in the future. They'll redo deals like they always do, but if you're going to get a player like Jordan Addison, I think there's plenty of guys like him in free agency. Yeah, he's cheaper than those guys for sure, but in the long run, you may get a better deal in return. I'll put it this way. I'd rather pay Alec Pierce $24 million a season for 4 or 5 years than trade for Jordan Addison, lose a draft pick, and maybe go through character concerns or a long negotiation process that could blow up in their face in about a year and a half. So I'd be out on that, but you got to find wide receivers. We have 2 comments. Bobo once again saying George Pickens is a free agent. Doesn't block, too expensive. So I like Pickens. I think he fits the Dallas Cowboys offense perfect. Jerry be pretty dumb to let that guy go, but I don't think he fits what San Francisco wants to do. I think a lot of times you see a lot of wide receivers out there, and the first response is go get that guy. Kyle is really particular, really, really, really particular in his guys, and I think there should be some more leniency in that. I think we'll get into my complaint about Kyle and Jordan Watkins later in the show, but Kyle just has his type and will not change, right? But that's who he is, and it's worked a lot of times, but wide receiver has been an area of concern for about 2 years now. Papa J asks, how about Chris Olave? I think Olave fits in the same category as Jordan Addison. Olave is more proven, but there is concussion issues, or at least there's been a history of those. Will he play the next half decade or so? I don't know. I think the Saints want to extend him, so it might put a damper on maybe acquiring someone like him. So I would say no on Pickens, no Addison, and no on Olave for very different reasons. Pickens too expensive, Addison some character concerns, and obviously the contract stuff. Then Olave probably isn't getting moved at all. Niners First Takes, Aaron, co-host of the Cover 3 podcast, exclusive to YouTube on Fridays, 2 p.m. Should be a fun show this Friday. He says, I really have no guff with the press conference other than the refusal to change. I'm assuming you mean the training staff, the injury stuff. We both know they wouldn't do it. And thank you for the $5, Aaron. Obviously, you're always appreciated here on the show. We'll save the injury talk for a second. I have a big complaint about this, Aaron. I know you've been hammering the injury stuff for a long time, and rightfully so, right? It just becomes exhausting being a fan, and I'm sure as a player too. And we'll get into the reluctancy of the organization to make a change, which is just baffling. But Aaron, love you, brother. Hope you're doing well, and appreciate the $5. Again, it goes into my wife's Starbucks fund, so thank you guys so much. And Papa J makes the most important comment of them all, saying like and subscribe, obviously. But our next question here, I believe it's by, again, Chawa. I have no idea. I'm sorry. Give me the phonetic spelling. I'm not good with names. I'm very sorry. You would think my journalism degree would come in handy, but obviously it's not happening right now. They ask, how can we fix our offensive line problem? Well, I'll tell you this. 4 starters are locked into place. Trent's coming back. Brendel's here to stay. Don't love that, but that's the case. Maybe they make a change there, but it's unlikely. Pooney's there to stay. I think Pooney's probably in for a bounce back season. He wasn't great to begin the year. There was some struggles late, but in year 3, you expect that's the big leap for a guard or most players. And McKivitz signed a brand new deal during the season. So the main question you're getting into is how do you fix left guard? Um, right now, I think there's a couple options out there via free agency. To be honest with you, I have not dove into the draft class just yet. Some guys are still declaring. Some guys are going back to college, so kind of waiting for that class to dwindle down. But as the next few months go by, I can give you a better answer in regards to who's in the draft. I believe this draft class, from my limited knowledge right now, is not a great guard class as a whole. So your options are probably going to be in free agency. You can go the more expensive route, albeit the more injured route, in Elijah Vera Tucker, former Jets first round draft pick a couple years ago. It doesn't seem like he'll be brought back by New York this year, which, kind of stinks. Again, very good player when healthy, just hasn't been healthy at all. I think he has 3 of his 4 seasons. There's been like 3 catastrophic, I think, season-ending injuries. May want to stay away from that, but also you could be the benefactor of maybe a guy who's a late bloomer in his career. You can also keep out there in the Jets, New York area, and go sign John Simpson, who isn't a great pass protector and really struggled this year, but last year in 2024 with the Shanahan offense in place was a really good run blocker. So those are 2 options out there, varying degrees of expense, but you really aren't going to see them overhaul things. A lot of mock drafts out there saying left tackle, left tackle, left tackle. I don't see it happening. I think this team is a we'll fix it when we have to kind of team. They had to fix the defense last year, hence why their first 5 picks were all defensive players. They don't have to fix left tackle now, and really this team likes to spend almost no money. They believe in Chris Forrester as the offensive line coach to lift the tides. And Forrester himself has basically said, unless there is a true game-changing talent out there, we're not going to sign him. And so maybe you go get Lindstrom from the Ravens and maybe he plays guard, but it just doesn't seem like San Francisco is in the building or in the, realm of wanting to do that. So I think they're going to send a lower tier guy, maybe a boomer bust guy. We'll see what Burford's market is. I wouldn't expect it to be too high, but I didn't think Jalen Moore was going to get what he got last year, and that was crazy. So, or even Aaron Banks getting $72 million from the Packers. So we'll see how things progress. But right now, those are your 2, as of what I believe to be their 2 free agent options, John Simpson and Elijah Vera Tucker, which neither one of those guys moved me too much, but, that's kind of how San Francisco operates. So there you go. Renee on Facebook. What's going on, Renee? They ask, I really like D'Angelo Pons, the cornerback from Indiana. Oh, we know D'Angelo Pons from Indiana. Do you think he'd be a good draft choice? So Pons fits what San Francisco wants their cornerbacks to do. Really physical, at the line of scrimmage, great tackler, knows for the football, right? There's a reason why they have Lenore, who's an undersized outside cornerback. There's a reason why they picked Upton Stout, and although probably an overdraft, it still was a great pick, and he's probably, the ace in the hole of this year's draft class. After Michael got hurt, and as the year went on, Upton Stout, things clicked for him in a big way. I do think San Francisco needs to bring in somebody. My assumption is, based on what John Lynch said today, they're going to be players in free agency. Now, I don't know what that means. That could be for a wide receiver. It can be for a tight end. I think the offense needs to find explosiveness more than the defense needs to find an outside cornerback, in my opinion. You can't really move him on the inside because you have Stout there, and he's undersized. So I think he's going to be an awesome player. Again, there is, some size limitations to his game, but when you speak of, what the Niners want of their defensive backs, Pons fits it to a bill. I just don't think right now, they need to find an outside cornerback, and I would have concerns because of size if Pons can translate out there. I think he's more in the Stout and Jacob Parrish conversation, who is great for the Buccaneers as a nickelback this year. And again, I think he'd be great, but I just don't know if he fits for San Francisco, their needs, and they really should find a cornerback that is about 6'1", 6'2". You don't want to have 3 cornerbacks below 5'10". Lenore's 5'10", Stout's 5'8" on a good day, and Pons is probably a little shorter than that on a good day. So you don't want to have tiny dudes. It makes for a big mismatch, but you plug him somewhere else, and I think he'll have a great career. Just hopefully it's not the NFC West. That would be pretty bad. But moving on to the next topic of conversation from what John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan said regarding the coaching staff and the DC search. With Robert Saleh leaving, they were asked, do you expect him to steal some of your coaches going to out there in Tennessee? And he said, yeah, we do expect Saleh to try to poach some staff members. Now, I don't think the Titans have an offensive play caller. San Francisco would likely block any Clay Kubiak discussion there, but kind of steering the ship or the conversation back into what San Francisco's defensive coordinator search could be this offseason. I already mentioned KJ Wright. If you're Robert Saleh, why wouldn't you steal KJ Wright? Young coach, promising coach, and one that San Francisco is probably eyeing in some capacity to have a big step or big role on next year's coaching staff, whether it be defensive passing game coordinator role or, being a DC in a year or two, maybe even this year, if they want to take a big jump or a risk, if you will. But if you're Robert Saleh, why wouldn't you take all the guys San Francisco isn't going to promote on that defense? Daniel Bullock's one of those guys, San Francisco's defensive back coach. Wouldn't you make him, the DC, quote unquote, out there in Tennessee? Like, there's a lot of, not concern, I would say, because you can replace guys like that. But talk about continuity. The one thing you don't want to have is a brand new defensive coordinator, then a bunch of your assistants leave, and that guy not bring some of his own dudes in place. That's a big concern, at least maybe a concern if Saleh starts picking apart the defensive staff. But yeah, that's my one fear, is that you lose Bullocks or KJ Wright, two guys this regime loves on the defensive staff this year. I don't think there's risk of losing Chris Kocurek unless Kocurek wants to go work in Nashville, which he's been here forever. I don't think he'd want to leave. I think he'd be more inclined to wait to see if Jim Schwartz comes to San Francisco. They have ties out there with the Lions a couple of years back when they were coaching together in Detroit. So watch out for that. You may see some of the candidates that we discussed yesterday as DC candidates leave for Tennessee with Saleh, which would obviously kind of put a damper on San Francisco's offseason even further. You lose in the playoffs, you lose your DC, then you lose more coaching staff members. Never good, for a staff that will have to replace one of the biggest coaches this year. Moving along to the next topic, I think one on the minds of many. We talked about Brandon Aiyuk. We talked about some replacements at wide receiver. What about bringing back one of their own in Jauan Jennings? What are the Niners going to do? They went through a long and lengthy, or not lengthy, but they had kind of a discussion of sorts, a negotiation of sorts during last offseason, led to a mini holdout by Jauan due to an ankle injury in camp. And he battled the whole year through injury, basically, and he had one of the best years of his career. Didn't reach 1,000 yards. He missed too many games for that. But you got to think, 2 years ago, 2024, he misses 1,000 yards by like 3 yards, right? This year, he misses 10 touchdowns by 1 touchdown. He was a big reason why San Francisco won that playoff game in Philadelphia. Threw a touchdown, caught a big 40-yard pass in that game in Philly. And, Jauan does everything Shanahan likes from wide receivers. 1, he blocks. 2, he fights for every single yard. And 3, and most importantly, he has a great repertoire and chemistry with Brock Purdy as a quarterback, who is someone who likes to high point the football and let his guys go up there and get it. That is what Jauan Jennings does. And to lose a guy like that on top of losing Brandon Aiyuk, Debo's been gone for a year now, Christian McCaffrey's 1 year older, and George Kittle, although will miss a large portion of next season, according to John Lynch, he may play next year. So you are losing a lot of your offensive core, and they're aging. And I think, and I'm on record saying Jauan's, skill set, he isn't a guy that relies on 4.3 speed, 4.4 speed. He'll run a 4.7, 4.8, right? That translates to longevity. Now, yeah, he'll get beaten up and broken down, but Jauan fights through injury constantly. And Jauan had broken ribs, a hurt ankle, a hurt shoulder. It was like, throw me the ball. Give me the ball, coach. And I think as he ages, like he's a throwback player that can fight through anything. He isn't jacked. He isn't shredded. He doesn't have these muscle tears and issues. He's a guy who's like, get some dirt, rub it on there, and get back in the game. And, that's kind of the tenacity San Francisco wants out of their offense. And on a team that lacked that this year, Jauan was that kind of, stick in the water, stick in the sand. I'm like, whoa, this is a barren desert of offensive weapons. And there's Jauan and Chris McCaffrey that are just riding the wave and saying, hey, we're here. We're banged up, we're bruised, we're broken, but we're still standing, right? And they were asked about, will you try to bring back Jauan Jennings after a failed negotiation process last year? Couldn't reach a brand new deal. You had some spats with him on the sideline against Tampa Bay. Well, John Lynch said, and I quote here, "We'd love to have Jauan Jennings back, and we're going to do everything we can to accomplish that." And that's a big deal to me. That shows that they want to re-sign a player that they don't have to re-sign. They could easily let Jauan Jennings walk, maybe get a compensation pick in return, and or use that money to go sign a different wide receiver to kind of add some speed to this offense. And they're like, look, we might lose him, but we're going to try to bring him back, and that's a big deal to me. I would love Jauan to be back. I think Jauan's a team player. I know, again, there was some hiccups along the way this year, but that's a guy wanting money. He didn't really hold out too long. He didn't miss games. He got his incentives. He earned the incentives. That's somebody you want to pay. That's someone you want to bring back. Aiyuk, different story, right? Star receiver, first-round draft pick. Just that whole charade was a red flag. And, now you have Jauan, who I of the free agent wide receivers, will probably have a pretty big market. But I think Jauan likes this team. Jauan talked about, letting his agent doing his work for him, but I think Jauan wants to be in San Francisco. Honestly, I've been on record again saying draft defense, spend money on the offense. And if you can bring in Pierce, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jauan Jennings back, I think you're in a pretty good place offensively. Obviously, you got to find some more pieces involved in there. It would be incomplete, but from a weapons standpoint, you get your speed with Pierce or Robinson, Rashid Shaheed, those guys, but also you get your bruiser, kind of, tight end 2, possession wide receiver on third downs that can actually, be a 10 touchdown a year type of guy. That's a big deal for San Francisco, and I think, there's a reason why. There's a reason why they love Jauan so much. I think the reason why Jauan's probably going to end up back in San Francisco this offseason, unless somebody wows him. Watch out for Tennessee. Again, we talked about that last weekend or yesterday too. He went to college there. Saleh's now there. They bring somebody over from San Francisco to call plays. Maybe that changes. But in the meantime, we wait and we hope for Jauan Jennings to return. Fluffy Ninja, haven't seen you in a long time. Hope you're doing well. They ask, hey, big guy, who do you like for DC? Who do I like? Probably not who they're going to hire. So we'll put it that way. I would love Matt Burke from the Houston Texans, but under contract, he is their DC, wouldn't move laterally. So put that aside. I'm hoping they talk to Corey Unland, also in Houston. He was in San Francisco. He's their passing game coordinator out there with the Texans. Raheem Morris is fine. Don't love it. Just it's a big step down from Saleh. The one kind of, big name is Jim Schwartz. That's the guy I think you want to bring in. That's the guy who's probably not going to be eyeing a head coaching job in a long time. But the under-the-radar moves, Corey Unland, definitely involved in that conversation for sure. So that's what I'll give you. We talked about that a lot yesterday. So if you want a more in-depth discussion on that, Fluffy Ninja, watch yesterday's show. It is called Replacing Robert Saleh on the thumbnail. That probably is what you want to see in here. But while I have you here, I want to answer Beto's question from Facebook. They ask, where would you start with improving the roster? So many needs, roster needs, upgrades all over. Greetings from Mexico. Well, hello to you out there in Mexico. Thank you for watching. Niner fans all over the place, all over the globe. I appreciate you being here on a Wednesday night. Where would I start? Man. This team doesn't have a ton of draft picks, but they have some good draft picks. had their first round draft pick for a third straight year. Big one, obviously. Picking 27th, I believe, in this year's draft. I think in the draft, I would go defense, right? I think this team desperately needs that backup, or not backup, needs that interior pass rusher. Would really, really, really want to get an interior pass rusher in place. Yeah, you love Michael as that guy. You love Collins. You love West, but you want that 3-down player. There's a reason why myself and others were really leaning towards Walter Nolan in last year's class. So on defense, I'd go there. I think a lot of people have things turned around in their head of like, well, the secondary is so bad, and they're right to some extent. Safety, also a big concern back there. You cannot throw out there Siegel and Brown and Mustafa again. I like Mustafa, but you got to find a free safety, a covered safety. So I think getting that interior pass rusher, that 3-down, not nose tackle, but defensive tackle, to be there with Bosa, be there with Michael. Like, imagine on third downs, it's 3rd and 7, right? The Rams, Seahawks want to pass the football, and you're tossing out there Michael and let's say a top-notch pass rushing defensive tackle. Watch out for John Franklin Myers of the Denver Broncos. Could be a big name San Francisco signs this year. So like think on third downs, it's Huff, Michael, John Franklin Myers, and Bosa compared to what it was this year when it was, let's say it's week 2. Let's say it's Bosa, Huff, Michael, and Clea Davis, Jordan Elliott. Those are depth guys for a reason. So on defense, I think that's where I'd start. I like the linebacker core. Warner obviously covered up a lot of the mess that was. Nick Martin comes back. He finally cleared concussion protocol, so hopefully, he can figure things out in year 2. I think he's on the way. He plays like a Niner linebacker. D. Winters had his struggles, but I do like what they have there. They're young linebackers. So fixed safety. And again, going back to what I think fans are asking for, but don't really, get is, or at least our misunderstanding is that, this front 7 ties to that secondary. Go back to 2019, and maybe it's an outdated method, according to many fans, but I believe in it. A great pass rush makes a mediocre or good enough secondary a great secondary. They tossed out there Sherman, an elite cornerback for that year in 2019. Then it was K'Wan Williams, who was a good cornerback at nickel. Then it was an undrafted Emmanuel Mosley, who, good player, but an undrafted guy in his first year of the NFL, starting for you in a Super Bowl. Jimmy Ward, who had transitioned to safety recently in his time with San Francisco. And Jaquiski Tart, who I like Tart, and he was a nice player for a while, but this wasn't the guy. I think San Francisco, kind of matched that with Bosa and D Ford and Buckner and Armstead. And okay, you have your Eric Armstead and Michael Williams, barring health. You have your Bosa still, barring health. You have your Bryce Huff for the next year. When his option gets picked up, go find your DeForest Buckner this year, or at least try to fill that void that you are plugging with, again, Clea Davis and Jordan Elliott. So on defense, I would go front still. It's important. It can make the lives of those guys in the secondary so much easier. And if you bring in Jim Schwartz, that is a must. You got to fix safety for sure, but you got to have, like, in a perfect world, or the world I could envision San Francisco having, it's probably Gus Bradley being the defensive coordinator. I would go sign Julian Blackman off an injury to be your free safety. He's a great coverage player on the back end. Was with Bradley in Indianapolis. So your secondary is the same people, but Blackman's back there instead of Jair Brown. Then you go find your John Franklin Myers. You pay for him where you draft the guy in the first round to be an interior pass rusher. Then voila, it's a whole new defense next year with West still involved and Collins still behind them. Like, you can start to get a really clear picture as to, okay, this defense goes from banged up and terrible towards the end, shredded because injuries, to a really good defense, at least to begin the season. Fingers crossed, no injuries next year. But on offense, speed, man. Kittle's not going to play for 14 weeks, although that's been debated. We have no idea how Kittle's recovery will go. We got good news on that today, but also Kittle said the Achilles tear was higher on the ankle, which means no drilling into the bone and could mean he's back sooner than expected. I would assume at the earliest he's back by week 6, but that can get pressed down to like week 10, week 12. No need to rush him back, but you got to find the tight end. I think a very underrated update we got today was that Jake Tunges has plantar fasciitis. They said it's a 3-week injury. We all know plantar fasciitis could be the end of someone's career. So I would go look for guys like Kyle Pitts. He may get franchise tagged. We'll see. Tyler Higbee fits the offense playing with the Rams, but it's an older guy, pretty banged up. Maybe they draft a guy or two and just say, hey, look, we went youngster on defense in 2025. Young guys have to be a big part of what we do offensively in 2026. I wouldn't hate that. I also wouldn't mind signing another former Colt. It's kind of a stopgap in between that. It's Mo Alley-Cox, underrated. He's not fast, but he's a possession catch guy, and he's a good blocker. And I would assume Luke Farrell would get cut because he's not good and he's too expensive. And they have that in his contract. So that was a lot there, Beto. Hope I answered your question. Again, whole off season to come. We'll get more into that as the weeks go by. Super Masonry and Construction says Josh Allen wants out. Give them Brock and 2 firsts. No. Why would you do that? Josh Allen threw 4 interceptions in that game against the Broncos. Why would you do that? I know McDermott got fired in Buffalo, and probably deservedly so. They've missed the mark and haven't reached their peak ever with him. But the quarterback paid to save the day, he wasn't good either. And he's getting no heat for it. Josh Allen was terrible in that game. If they don't turn the ball over, or if they turn it over 3 times instead of 4 times, they probably win that game. So, no, Purdy's just fine. I think he proved that this year. Purdy can do a lot for this team to elevate what was a terrible offense. They couldn't run, no weapons, and they figured it out. Josh Allen had an offensive running game in James Cook. They didn't have that in San Francisco. You can even argue that Brock Purdy elevated more in San Francisco this year than Josh Allen did out there in Buffalo, which I don't think we thought we'd be saying 2 years ago now, but here we are. So, Super Masonry and Construction, I appreciate your comment. I don't agree with your thought, though, but thank you so much. It's Wednesday. You're here. It's a hump day, and we're moving along here on the show. Well, actually, but first, we have another question that says, would you trade down from pick 27 into day 2? That would depend on what San Francisco does with Mac Jones and if they can get something for him in the offseason. I know today that Kyle said he would be shocked if Mac Jones isn't on the roster in 2026. I think it would take a lot to get rid of him. You saw how valuable he can be to this offense and this team this year, what he means to that room. And San Francisco has, they have some leverage because they can have Mac Jones be the backup for Brock Purdy in 2026, and he can leave in 2027. If he gets paid a nice chunk of change like Sam Darnold did, he can get you 3rd or 4th round draft pick in return. So I think if you're San Francisco, you are probably asking for a 2nd round draft pick. And if some team says, hey, we'll give you a 3rd round draft pick and maybe a high 3rd round draft pick in a bad quarterback class, and that may change some things, and maybe you say no, but really it all depends on who's there. There were some rumors out there, the same source that said San Francisco wants to trade for Jordan Addison, that said San Francisco wants to trade up in the draft. I don't think anyone hasn't done their draft talk yet, but the Super Bowl hasn't even happened yet. And the Senior Bowl hasn't happened yet. Teams have not sat down and gone through all their stuff. They have scouts out there, obviously. They have a general big board put together, but no one knows. So would I trade down? It depends. If there is maybe no prospect San Francisco values at that pick, then maybe. But, you get a valuable 5th-year option on whoever prospect you take in the 1st round. So that's why they took Pearsall. That's why they didn't risk trading back down, which maybe that's not a good move in retrospect, but that's why it happened, right? I also think that San Francisco this year needs to draft best player available. In previous years, when you're good, everyone's locked up, you can just pick needs and you can find the best guy at that need that you think is the right pick. Well, now San Francisco has a lot of holes to fill. Now they're a good team, so they won 12 games this year. But you're losing your defensive coordinator. You may plug in a stopgap, probably knowing Gus Bradley for a year. But oh wow, the Mets are acquiring Freddie Peralta from the Brewers. Do something, Giants. Anyways, we continue. So I just think BPA is what San Francisco should do. You have to start accumulating talent. San Francisco lacks talent at a lot of places. Now they have a lot of talent at some places, but like Seattle, they just said, give me the BPA. And it turned into a juggernaut defense in the span of 2 seasons. I think San Francisco should go down that route in 2026. Okay, moving along here to my next topic. That is Mac Jones. Again, Shanahan said he'd be surprised not on the team. I think he's too valuable for San Francisco to say yes to anything. So they have a right to be stingy and ask for a lot for him. I am going to go on a limb and say Mac Jones is a San Francisco 49er, but things can change on draft day. And if he does get traded, I would assume it would be on day 2 or in between day 1 and day 2 of the NFL draft. San Francisco has no reason to make a trade until draft night, with leverage already in place for them, cheap contract, valuable player to them. And you haven't seen Curtis Rourke that much. And even Rourke has a lengthy injury history. So you never know. And you probably don't want to be in the market for a backup quarterback again this year if you don't have to be. Zach Wilson's out there and guys like that. So maybe they're options for sure. But Mac is clearly the best backup quarterback in football, at least entering the offseason. We'll see if that changes next year. But I don't think Mac Jones gets dealt as of now. But second round draft pick, I think it's pretty hard to say no to. We have injury updates, though, I want to get to quickly, and good ones, I may add. Nick Bosa, right now on track to be back by training camp, according to John Lynch. He is a quote-unquote tracking really good. That's not proper English, but who needs that in this day and age? Micah Williams also tracking to return around the beginning of training camp. So San Francisco getting back to their most important defensive linemen to begin the year. And both those guys should be good to go by week 1 of 2026. So good stuff there. This defense was very different. It was top 10 when those 2 guys were healthy. So getting those 2 guys back will be a big difference maker for them next year. Alfred Collins, a standout second-round draft pick this year. He was awesome towards the end of the year, but I guess his shoulder gave out against Seattle in that playoff game. He will maybe need off-season shoulder surgery. It doesn't sound like it is too invasive or too serious. So a minor procedure is what it sounds like. Hopefully it's not a big deal because this team needs Alfred Collins. And the one thing you don't want to do is walk into an offseason already injured and have things linger. We saw it before, and we'll see it already with Kittle. Don't want Collins the same way. So if he needs it, get it cleaned up and done. Don't delay things, then have to get it later. So hopefully they can figure things out in the next weeks or so. And if he needs it again, act quick. Let the recovery process start as soon as it possibly can. The next guy, and Aaron's favorite wide receiver on the roster. That's right, Ricky Pearsall. A lot of people are out on Pearsall, and I get it. A lot of injuries, things he couldn't control, things he not could control, but things that, put him in the injury riddled category, the injury prone category. It's hard to ignore the fact that he's played in less games than he's appeared. He's missed more games than he's played in. I think he's missed 21 games and played in 15. Not great. So what can Pearsall do, and what did Kyle Shanahan have to say about Pearsall's injury luck in 2025? And you may not want to hear this, but he kind of chalked things up to bad luck for Pearsall, and I think I'd agree that a lot of the injury stuff with Pearsall, um, it really was bad luck, right? You got shot last year, then come back and you're pretty healthy all year, right? And you look pretty good your rookie season this year. You have a small, I think it was a shoulder injury or ankle injury in training camp, but you make it through and you're healthy for week one. You show off for the first 3 weeks and we all say, whoa, finally, Pearsall's rock star. He was like leading the NFL in receiving yards or somewhere in that grouping to begin the year. And we all said, we got the guy. Pearsall's awesome. He's healthy. And he looks like the next big thing in this Niners offense. And all of a sudden, week 4 came, hurts a PCL, and it cost him like 7 weeks. He comes back, the very first play, it's what is it? It was or the second week he comes back. He comes back against the Cardinals. The next week against Tennessee, I believe, he gets a hip drop tackle, hurts his ankle, then fights through that injury, and later in the game falls on his knee. And you're just like, man. And that costs him the last month of the year too. So a lot of it is bad luck. A lot of it maybe is Pearsall's too thin. Maybe Pearsall's just going through some things where he has to bulk up. Shanahan did say that Pearsall played in 8 games this year, but admittedly was only himself in 4 of them. And I think it showed. He wasn't himself against Seattle. He wasn't himself against the Cardinals in his first game back. He wasn't himself against Jacksonville, trying to play through the initial injury in week 4. And it does seem as if Shanahan thought that Pearsall did everything he could during this past offseason to get bulked up and be healthier. But maybe that needs to continue. Shanahan did also offer that, maybe Pearsall needs to work on whatever process that is of trying to avoid injury or avoid re-injury as he rehabs. So young player entering year 3 already, which is crazy to say. Year 3. San Francisco, I think, has to make a decision on his 5th-year option, not this coming year, but in the offseason of next year. So it's a big year for Pearsall. He's trending towards not getting his 5th-year option picked up, but that doesn't mean he can have a big 2026, and hopefully he does, because this team needs him. They need his speed out there because he can be, like Mike Kellenbosa, a big difference maker for this Niners team in 2026. That said, as I clip the microphone, I have a bone to pick with Kyle Shanahan. It's one that I mentioned in my near 2-hour post-Seattle loss podcast of that, okay, you can look at the offense, and we can all see what the team lacked. And Shanahan himself admitted today that the team needs to get faster. The team, their miles per hour on their wide receivers dropped from like 19 to 18 a couple years ago to like 16 this year, because you had Demarcus Robinson and Jauan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne and Malik Turner out there catching passes for you. And those guys are fine in their unique roles. We love Jauan, and Demarcus was a pretty bad signing this past year, but came up big in a playoff game, but was really inconsistent. And so this team needs speed, whether it's drafting a wide receiver, in the first round, signing guys in free agency. Like, this team has to find speed. Okay, that's understood. We can all agree with that. Shanahan says it. I can say it. Everybody and their mother could see it against the Seattle Seahawks. They were flying around making plays, and San Francisco was stuck in the mud. You can't do that. You're going to lose a lot of games, and it's a big, there's levels to Seattle up here and San Francisco down here. But my bone to pick is, okay, you need speed. Yet the refusal to play your 5th-round pick wide receiver, who I think was, if not top 10, he may have been the 2nd best wide receiver in all college football last year in contested catch rate, and also runs a 4.443 in Jordan Watkins. That can get open downfield, played in this explosive passing attack that Lane Kiffin ran with Jackson Dart last year at Ole Miss, and you refuse to play him. Today, Kyle was asked, why did you not play Jordan Watkins outside of one attempt against the Giants in a 19-week season? What happened there? His excuse, or reasoning, I should say, was that Jordan Watkins had an ankle sprain in training camp. It cost him the time where he could jump over guys or prove himself on the depth chart. And then he never recovered from that. I'm sorry. You were trotting out Malik Turner in playoff games. You were relying on Kendrick Bourne, Demarcus Robinson, Sky Moore, Jauan Jennings in playoff games. And the fifth-round rookie who has fresh legs, can offer you speed, can get open downfield, take the top off a defense, or at least try to, because why not try things in the NFL late in the year when you're desperate for speed and desperate for healthy bodies and desperate for something else? You saw Jordan James in the playoff game. He had fresh legs. He looked awesome in that game against Seattle. Jordan Watkins couldn't do some of that. Jordan Watkins didn't look terrible against the Giants, which is one catch in that game. So the reasoning is you got hurt in July or in August, and it cost you 4 months, 5 months of potential play. What? Huh? I'm sorry. Michael hurt his leg during training camp, and he played until he got hurt again. West hyperextended his knee, and he played all year, basically, outside of the middle part of the season. He began the year on the active roster. So why is it only the offensive players that are young and rookies have this, we're going to, really oppress you on the roster because you missed a month period of time? I get it. Again, the offense, Shanahan is really, really particular with the wide receivers. But seriously, you're going to hold a August, week 2, week 1 of the preseason ankle sprain against a guy? You're going to hold a July ankle sprain against the dude all year when you're trotting out Malik Turner in playoff games? When you know for a fact your offense has no speed, you lose George Kittle in the Philadelphia game, and you're like, change nothing. What? What offensive mind does that? Imagine Sean McVay, Clay Kubiak, Seattle, the Rams, right? Two of the best teams in the NFC. Imagine Andy Reid, who probably isn't the best bar to try to compare Kyle to, but we'll use it. Those guys will find any way to win. That can mean utilizing your one trait you have, your one strength they can utilize to exploit the opposing team. Kyle will keep speedsters and guys on the depth chart buried behind dudes that probably shouldn't even be rostered at times in the NFL, and say, well, you blew it 4 months ago, so you don't get a chance the rest of the year. What are we doing? Now, I'm not saying Jordan Watkins is the guy. I'm not saying Jordan Watkins is the end-all be-all to this. But you did the exact same thing with Brandon Aiyuk. And like now, hindsight's 2020. Maybe Aiyuk was the problem there. But you cannot hinder your offense in ways like this. You cannot willingly hold young players back from developing. You wonder why, Kyle, the Niners have a hard time with wide receivers? It's because of stuff like this. It pisses them off early. They don't let it go, and they feel like they've probably missed a chance to succeed in the NFL. Now, Debo made it past it, right? Aiyuk made it past it. Jennings made it past it. But, seriously? Now, again, I'm not saying Watkins is maybe the perfect reasoning or the perfect example of guys that should play. I'm not saying that. But you cannot have, or like that, and that's kind of the concern of drafting a wide receiver. Right? Of okay, you draft a guy, is he even going to play? If you draft a 3rd-round wide receiver, a 4th-round wide receiver, who McVay would utilize, who Kubiak would utilize, who Reid would probably start week 1 if he could, Kyle would hold them back for breaking a fingernail in training camp. That's insane. Imagine if your boss, wherever you work, I have no idea. Imagine you work there, or you just got into the job. Like, it's almost like Kyle is punishing guys for a bad first impression when the first impression is incontrollable. Or is it uncontrollable? Whatever. Like, what can Jordan Watkins do about an ankle sprain? Nothing. And Kyle's like benched the whole year. What? It's stuff like that that makes me as a fan who loves Kyle, think he's an awesome coach of the year this year for sure, go, yeah, I don't trust you to draft guys though, because even if you do, you're not going to play them, especially if they're below the second round. And that's a concern because you have other teams relying on young guys to win them games. Seattle's chock full of young dudes on that defense. Seattle has Nicky Manwari, an all-pro, rookie nickelback big safety. Now, I know San Francisco played a ton of defensive rookies this year, but like, talent. McVay was trotting out Puka. Now he's an all-pro in 3 years or 2 years. You hinder young guys. The best experience is playing. That's how you learn, right? The game slows down for you when you play. And the last thing you want is, well, they had an offseason to grow. What does an offseason do for you if you haven't played in the NFL? Nothing. You may see minor improvements, but okay. San Francisco shouldn't be saying, well, a second offseason for a guy who hasn't played up but one game in their one-year career. Yeah, big leap in 2027, 2026. How about you just play a guy because you need to play a guy? And if he sucks, he sucks. He's going to lose confidence either way. Either you play him and he's not good and he loses confidence, or you don't play him. He's like, why can't I play in front of that dude? That guy's not good. I know I'm better than that guy. I can help the team more than that guy can. But it just like young wide receivers, even if they aren't good, are stuck in a rock and a hard place in San Francisco to a point where if you're not proven or you're in the draft, I wouldn't want to go play for San Francisco as wide receiver. Like, I'd be like, don't pick me. And that's insane to say, but like, do you blame them? It's a great offense with the hard ass as a head coach who is so like, you have to fit this very small niche of wide receiver. And even if we can utilize your skill set and desperately need it, too bad. You sprained your ankle in July. Not going to play at all. That's got to change. It's got to change. Another question here says, do you think Larry is right? Larry Kruger, good friend. We're on Thursdays together, live on YouTube. That's always fun. They ask, do you think Larry is right about this team either needing to trade Ricky Pearsall or the team should trade Pearsall and Bernardo Green? No. Why would you willingly lose talent that you're banking on being like, offensively, you're going to lose Jauan, Aiyuk, Kittle for most of the year, and aging Chris McCaffrey, then trade Pearsall? Doesn't make any sense. You're going to willingly weaken your room. Now, let's say you're offered someone that's insane and it's Pearsall on a draft pick for that guy, then maybe, yeah. But I'm not trading them for nothing. I'm not trading them for a third-round draft pick. That's bad business. And Green, I thought, was really bad at times this year, but also really good at times this year. And I think you have to find consistency, but that's what a third year for, or that's what a third year is for. I don't go by a 1 year timeline with players. And sometimes you have to go year by year with certain dudes. Ambry Thomas being the biggest example of that, probably in San Francisco. Wow, rookie, played great. Then it fell off a cliff late in this, second, third year in the NFL and just couldn't find his footing again. But no, I'm not trading I'm not trading this team's 2024 first and second round draft picks for what? Spare change and a packet of gum? No. And I'm not saying Larry's saying that either. I'm just saying I'm not trading those guys knowing you're losing a lot of your offense and you don't have an answer to your cornerback 3 spot. You're going to put Darrell Luter Jr. out there, who was terrible against Seattle. It was bad in mostly all of his play this year. No. Now, I'm not saying those guys' spots are safe as starters, but Pearsall can go into the slot and be fine. Green can be a backup and be fine. It's just, I'm not trying to remove talent from a roster, even if they aren't starting caliber. That doesn't make sense. But good question, though. I appreciate it. We're going to go fast here really quickly on the next couple things. The Niners are not planning to be, but could be big spenders in free agency. So a good sign there for a lot of the fans out there, including myself, who say go sign offensive stars. Alec Pierce, Jauan Jennings. Maybe you go sign Lindstrom and have him play center, cut Brendel, or go find a left guard. You got to find a tight end. Like, you can now spend money. You went through a dead cap year. You cut the fat off the roster because you wanted to go all in 06 or 26 and 27. Now you have the opportunity to do that. Now, I think they were banking on tight end not being a hole on the roster, but there's ways you can improve a lot of the rooms on the depth chart and help this roster and solidify some spots on the team. And John Lynch said the team has more financial flexibility during this free agency period, the next free agency period. So, free agency starts in like 2 months. It's around the corner. Things happen fast, right? I know it seems like it's a long time away, but free agency and the draft are 3 months away. It's very, very, very close. And I think that, San Francisco, I don't know who they'll sign, but we'll get more into my free agency, picks probably position by position as the offseason goes on. Maybe starting next week or so, we'll see. Maybe it's a post-Super Bowl conversation, but it's coming. And then we'll dive into the draft stuff shortly after that, because San Francisco has a ton of options in free agency that can help them, and it seems like they are going to be a factor in free agency again this offseason. Updates on George Kittle. There's a chance he does not miss all of 2026, as it felt like he would after tearing his Achilles. John Lynch today said he expects Kittle to be or make an impact in 2026. And also, he expects Kittle to return faster than expected because of the placement of the Achilles tear and the updated recovery timeline for Achilles tears with modern medicine. So good news. San Francisco, big spenders. George Kittle back next year, and hopefully he can remain healthy. Also, San Francisco is trying to retain their special team trio of John Weeks, their long snapper. I think he was a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro this year. So good for him. They want to bring back Thomas Morstead, who I'm indifferent towards. He knows Brant Boyer. He was good during the year, but he definitely lacks the strength in his legs to boot the ball downfield. He was really bad against Philadelphia in that playoff game. So I wouldn't mind them finding a younger punter that has some more oomph to their kicks, but placement-wise, really good. So maybe it isn't a problem next year, but they also want to bring back Eddie Dinero Pinheiro, as they should. He was money for them, and I think he's worth every penny. But kickers are also a volatile position where you bring in a guy and you give him maybe a franchise tag for $6 million, or you do a brand new deal for 2 years and give him some financial stability. That's all great and dandy, but I think San Francisco, I don't know if Eddie P, for as great as he was, kicker can go downhill so quickly, where I think that should be in the back of their minds somewhere. But I love Eddie P. He was a literal season saver for this team. So that is good news for San Francisco amongst what has been a rather kind of not sludge of an offseason after losing against Seattle, but still. You lose Saleh, and you may lose more pieces. You may lose some of your free agents that you have on your roster. So some good news there to pick you up as we enter into a weekend of me not watching football for the first time in 19 weeks. Sucks. Renee says on Facebook here that, in my opinion, the Seahawks and Rams have many hits in the draft while San Francisco has many misses. I feel like John Schneider and Les Snead have better eyes for talent than John Lynch. It's hard to disagree, or it's hard to disagree with your thought that the Seahawks and Rams have many more hits than San Francisco. It's pretty obvious, right? However, I would push back on the notion of Lynch having a worse eye for talent than Snead and John Schneider. And the reason I say that is speculation based on how the Niners operate in that draft room. I think a lot of the blame gets placed on John Lynch for a lot of the right reasons. He is the GM, same reason why losses get put on quarterbacks and wins get put on quarterbacks and head coaches alike. But the Niners have a very collaborative draft room. And that isn't to say that other teams don't, but I know for a fact that Kyle has had his picks. John has had his picks, and they've had staff members, scouts, have their picks. And so to chalk it up to, well, the GM isn't good at his job or he's worse than those guys, I think it's kind of foolish, or at least ill-advised, probably a better word to use there. I'm not meaning to call you a fool, Renee. Or those that want to blame Lynch for some of the misses that the team has had this year. I just think that, or in the last 5 years or so, I just think that San Francisco is so open to other people's ideas that gets them in trouble. And some of the misses we've seen, which there have been plenty of them to say, they had 2 draftfuls of misses basically, outside of Brock Purdy, in 2022, 21 and 22 were not great draft classes for San Francisco. And really neither was 23. So 3 bad draft classes for San Francisco, if we're being honest, that really, condemn them to being where they are now, which isn't bad, but isn't where it should be. I just think that, when you're letting Chris Forrester make a pick and you're letting Adam Peters make a pick and you're letting all the other people make picks and they miss, and Lestein's out there making, Puka Nacua a 5th-round draft pick, and Seahawks are making all the right moves for 2 straight years, and you're like, whoa, what an influx of talent. Meanwhile, San Francisco is just kind of like, yeah, we got some dudes, but we have a 35% hit rate. Meanwhile, our competitors have a 75% hit rate. It makes it tough. And, the draft comes down to luck, whether it's injury luck or just guys clicking. Some guys, like take Joe Williams, for example. That was an old draft pick in 2017, 2018 for San Francisco. Shanahan pounded the table. This is the guy. He's the running back. Didn't play a single snap in the NFL. And it's like, okay, that is bad luck, and maybe there were some unforeseen circumstances they didn't see. Then there is just some bad picks in Trey Lance and Jake Moody and Cam Latu that we all could say, what are you doing, right? But I think that the Niners, it may, and it's hard to say without being in that room, but San Francisco may be more inclined to tighten up the screws of who they let make draft picks. Now, I think Kyle is probably more okay with allocating his draft picks to other people, because I'm sure, like he would admit to you, he probably doesn't sit there and go through film and tape 24/7, right? That's why you pay scouts. But John Lynch should be doing those things. Now, I can give you some insight here that I think San Francisco had scouts at 3 Oregon games this year. And they've been known to take ducks in previous years, and really even in the last regime that was here. Buckner, Armstead, Lenore, Jordan James. This team seemingly wants to take an Oregon Duck, whether it's the first round or round 7, who knows, but watch out for that. This team was at Texas games a lot this year. So, as we go into the draft process, I think they have kind of found their pipeline of talent. You've seen them be at Indiana games this year for obvious reasons, them being the national champions. So I think for San Francisco, it's not really about John Lynch compared to other GMs. It is, more about maybe reducing how many voices are in that draft room, because it's been really muddy in recent years, and probably benefit them as a whole to kind of tighten the screws on their draft process. But a great comment leading to a great conversation that will probably be had a lot as the draft process comes and goes in the next 3 months or so. But speaking of John Lynch, I want to end with a banger, because I'm a little upset, as I'm sure many of you are. Now, I definitely am taking things more in stride than many, but this fan base is fed up. And at some point, I will get more fed up than I am, but I'm also fed up too, because the injuries are out of control. We know they're out of control. Kyle Shanahan said today that he felt like When Bosa went down in week 3, the season could have been over. When Warner went down in week 6 or 7, the season could have been over. And yeah, they persevered and they fought, and it was a testament to the coaching staff and the players on the roster. However, everyone's talking about how does this team prevent injuries? How does this team buck the trend of every year losing not 1, not 2, not 3, not 10, but seemingly 19 to 20 players, and 5 of them being the best on the roster? You lost Brock Purdy for a time this year. You lost Christian McCaffrey last year. There are concerns going into next year. If you gave him 450 touches, can he last for 18 weeks in a playoff run if you get there? You lost Kittle. You lost him again at the end of this year. You lost Pearsall not once, not twice, but 3 times throughout the year. Trent Williams is 37 years old, 38 years old next season. Bosa, 3rd ACL tear. Michael, his own ACL tear. Fred, a broken ankle. And while there's reason to have optimism and believe, the injuries are a major concern with the San Francisco 49ers. It's not new. And it is almost baffling the fact that they have failed to address any of it. And Aaron, if you're still watching, you may want to record this because I'm going to go in for a second because I know you feel probably the same way I do. Some injuries are bad luck. Some injuries, like John Lynch said today, are in fact part of the game. Fred Warner, part of the game. Nick Bosa, part of the game. Michael, maybe it's MetLife turf, but okay, part of the game. What's not part of the game is what I think was not just double digits. I think it was closer to 15, 16 soft tissue injuries this year. And that's multiple occurrences on multiple players. Jacob Cowing couldn't play all year because he strained his hamstring 4 to 5 times. Yetur Gross-Matos, who will not come back next year, thankfully, strained his hamstring 1 day at practice after returning from, guess what, straining his hamstring. These soft tissue injuries are a problem. They've hindered this team for a decade now. And what I don't want to hear is John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, but mainly John Lynch, just kind of pushing it aside and chalking it up to, it's football. It's not football. The Rams are nearly completely healthy. The Seahawks are nearly completely healthy. Now, would it have changed things come playoff time? Sure, maybe. Maybe you still lose, but being fully healthy matters. Having your stars healthy matter come playoff time. And I don't love what John Lynch said today, which was, and I quote, "We've spent a lot of time and effort to recruit really quality people, being at the forefront of injury prevention." He went on to say they have a good process in place and will challenge them all when it comes to hoping of preventing injuries next year. What a bunch of BS. How dare you sit there? And I love John Lynch, Hall of Famer, great player. I think he's a good enough GM, although he's had a lot of misses, as we already said today. How dare you sit up there and tell the fan base, who is running amok with conspiracies, trying to find solutions, because there's clearly a problem with the injury stuff, and tell us, it's football. It's not football, dude. Yeah, some things are football. But when the 2 top teams in the NFC, who you beat, mind you, twice this year, when nearly fully healthy, are out there in January, in the divisional round, in the now it'll be conference championship, facing each other, one of the major factors, star talent, it's quarterback, it's coaching, but also being fully healthy. And I don't think most fans are asking for a full bill of health. We know it's football. Guys are going to get hurt. But it's who you lost and how many of the injuries that seem to be preventable that occurred, that are a problem. He did mention that the team would look at everything, including the EMF waves and the substation, to see if that's a problem. Unfortunately, there was No follow-up question. There was no, hey, Kyle, you had 25 hamstring strains this year. You had 15 soft tissue injuries. What caused that? A lot of people are upset at the training staff. How does your team feel? Your team graded great on a lot of things on the annual NFLPA report cards. Training staff was not one of them. They think it's a problem. Your own players do. They are worried about the EMF waves. Some players across the NFL, whether valid or not, are like, I want to play in San Francisco or Santa Clara because of the injury concerns. They do something different than 31 other teams do, and it's a problem. And to brush it off, no acknowledgement of the absurd amount of injuries, just nothing. Oh, it's football, it's fine. It's like, this isn't a one-year thing. This is an every-year thing. And it may have cost you a Super Bowl. It may have cost you 2 Super Bowls. It may have cost you a shot this year at a Super Bowl. I don't know. I'm not going to play the what-if game. And look, the Niners can miss on draft picks every year. In fact, they do it every year. That is the name of the game. They can botch a player's development. It's happened plenty of times, and every team does it at a certain point in time. The Buffalo Bills and Keon Coleman being the most recent example of that. They can even spend millions of dollars on free agents that are busts, that are terrible. D Ford, Javon Hargrave, Yetur Gross-Matos. You can do it all day. I can accept those things because sometimes things are not in your control. Guy has a career year. You say, wow, that guy fits our defense. Sign him. Comes to San Francisco, isn't the same guy. Wow. You can botch negotiations and sign guys to massive contracts and have them quit on you. And you can all say, what the heck was that? Okay. What I cannot do as a fan, what I will not do as a fan, as a part of the media, is turn a blind eye to arguably the team's biggest problem, being the injuries in recent seasons, and act like the negligence, the carelessness is not a somewhat fireable offense. I'm not saying they have to go. I'm not saying fire Kyle. I'm not saying hashtag fire John Lynch. But at some point, if you continue to turn a blind eye to the problem and you continue to ignore the issue, what is that called? It's called insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm sorry, there's only a little bit of part of my life I can accept some insanity. And it's not when I see star players of this team continue to drop like flies because whether it's the training staff, whether it's the substation, whatever it may be, continues to not be addressed. And I don't know if it's substation stuff. I don't buy into the EMF stuff. I don't know the science behind it. Maybe it exists. Maybe it doesn't. My tinfoil hat's on sometimes. It's not here. I have no idea. But I know what is true. Every year, this team battles injuries. For a decade, this team battles injuries. Every year, this team loses big games because we all sit back and say, well, if they have this guy and that guy, things will be different. I'm tired of playing the what-if game with the injury stuff. I'm tired of John and Kyle, mainly John in this case, just kind of turning a blind eye. Oh, football. Yeah, it's football, dude. We all know what sport we play. That isn't the problem at hand here. It's not 1 year. It's been since you came over in 2017. In fact, before you were here in 2017, but you're the regime in place now, it's your job to fix things and find things. I don't like playing the what-if game with this team. But imagine this year, if San Francisco was at least 90, 85% healthy, and they had Michael and Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, and let's say George Kittle, who missed some time during the season. They had Brock Purdy back, but let's say he never had turf toe. Let's say you didn't lose Bethune and Yetur Gross-Matos at times this year. Let's say you had most of your team, mainly your stars, healthy. Could they have won the 1 seed? I don't know, maybe. What if? Could they have hosted a playoff game? Maybe their road to the Super Bowl went through Levi's Stadium and never left Levi's Stadium. Could they still be playing right now? Could we be talking about Niners and Rams, Niners and Bears, Niners and whoever this weekend? I don't know. You can translate the exact same conversation we're having now to 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and now, of course, 2025. And somebody out there may say, well, Sterling, they redid the coaching staff in 2019. The training staff, they changed it all. They realized the error of their ways and they changed it. No, they didn't. I thought that once too. But reminder, the vice president of player health has been on and with this team's training staff since 2017. They ain't changed jack squat. That's why the injuries haven't changed. You want to get into substation stuff, by all means, do your thing. I think it's a little weird, but by all means, that's your right. We all are trying to find the answer. And the substation thing is, a talking point now for a lot of reasons. But all that is the end to a means of people trying to find why this team is injured every year. Joseph says it's aliens, man. It's aliens. And I don't have an answer. I'm not paid to find the answer. They are. And the fact that today, after a season they had, which we can all agree, and they can agree too, they thought was over week 3 because Bosa went down. They thought it was over week 7 or 8 or 6 because Fred went down. Okay, if you feel that way, wouldn't you want to change it? Wouldn't you want to find the solution to fix that and say, hey, why are the Rams always healthy? Why are the Seahawks always healthy? Why are the Chiefs, not this year, but why are they predominantly healthy? Why is Philadelphia having 21 of 22 starters out there in a playoff game? Why can't we do that? Maybe it is a substation. Maybe it is, EMF waves. I don't know. But you can start with redoing the training staff, finding new answers, talking to those teams. GMs talk to each other. Head coaches talk to each other. Defensive coordinators talk to each other. You don't think Jim Bob and Boo Beep, the training staff guys, don't talk to each other? Ask them what's the problem. Ask them, hey, what's your training regimen that we can bring over to San Francisco and try to accommodate and kind of fix ourselves to help maintain our health for 18 weeks. I'm tired of seeing and having to play against healthy teams. We're out here with torn ACLs and torn MCLs and torn PCLs and torn UCLs and, broken ankles and trying to piece things together. I think everybody wants to be healthy, but it seems like San Francisco, John Lynch and company, is not willing to even look for an answer. And they're just pushing it off. They're treating these players' health, they're treating the longevity, the future of the organization from the outside looking in, how Shanahan talked about special teams for half a decade. Not my problem, not my problem, not my problem. Oh, Richard Hightower's over there, and this guy's over there, and Brian Schottenheimer, they'll figure it out. They never figured it out. And what did it take to finally put together a coaching staff with Brant Boyer that actually knew what he was doing, that had success in previous years, that knew who to bring over and how to fix things, and voila, in 1 year was a top 5 unit in football. Surprise, surprise, Kyle and John. The minute you start to look into things and go, hey, this actually doesn't make sense, let's make a change. You make a change, and it works. But you don't want to do it for injuries, which has been one of the big reasons you've lost a lot of games. Not the only reason. I'm not chalking up their losses to injuries, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to be healthy. Like, the worst thing about it is, and I talked about this when San Francisco lost to Seattle. They beat us by 34 points, whatever it was. It was a mauling, right? But there are always going to be the lingering questions of, what if we were fully healthy? I don't know. What if guys weren't banged up and hurt? What if Bosa and Michael and Fred were out there? What could have changed? Maybe the outcome didn't, but how you got there could have. And I don't know. I don't know. But it isn't my job to know, but it infuriates me as a fan that loves this team, that is 29 going on 30 in 10 months, which isn't very old, but still. I see my team lose 3 Super Bowls, and I see a regime bound for greatness at some point with a great head coach, a good quarterback, and a core that deserves to win a Super Bowl, and 2 cores previously that never got to win a Super Bowl. Sit here and go, well, the injuries don't matter that much to us. I'll figure it out. What are we doing? What are we doing? Like, at some point, something has to change. And it feels like John, maybe Kyle too, maybe it's Shed, I have no idea, just don't really feel the desire to change things. And you can sign whoever you want. You can pour money into the offense, pour money into the defense, draft the right players. It doesn't matter until you get the injury stuff figured out. Because there's no promise those guys aren't going to be healthy. Because you don't want to fix the injuries. You aren't trying to actively find solutions to the real problems you have. Well, the interior defensive line and the receiver, everything is speed. No one cares about speed, bro, if you can't get guys on the field that run 4-3 because you don't fix the injuries. That is my biggest issue with today. A lot of it that wasn't injury-related, I loved. I like to hear those things. Bring back Jauan Jennings. Keep Mac Jones. Awesome, man. Going to be big spenders in free agency. Woo-wee. San Francisco's back, baby. You won 12 games? You're feeling good. But that right there is why I get pissed off. Which I feel like I'm a pretty calm dude. I feel like I'm pretty reasonable at times. I am a lot more reasonable than Joseph Ehrenberg is in the comments, I'll tell you that. Happy you're here, Joseph, and thank you. I don't look a day over 19. Well, the gut may say otherwise. There's a reason why you guys can't see it on the screen, but thank you so much. But he also says here, I think the Niners did some sort of satanic ritual in the 80s, and now we're cursed to never win another one. Feels like Kyle practices them really hard, and either the team or the players don't prioritize rest and recovery enough. He says, Sterling, you are the biggest crash. I don't know. I mean, man, I'm not an overly emotional person when it comes to sports. I've seen too much. I'm numb to some things, but it's like when you see greatness in the future, where you can taste it. We've been there 3 times, and you're like, oh, here it is. And the team's like, the health of our players really isn't that important to us. We'll end with this. When the NFLPA comes out with their annual reports, where the players themselves vote on things, give letter grades to things, watch where San Francisco's training staff is. It is always towards the bottom of the NFL. 32 teams, usually it's in the bottom, 2, 3, 5. It's never at the top. Ownership, A+, coaching staff, A+, GM, front office, A+, training staff, like a C. Why? When your own players are telling you, this isn't good. You don't think players talk too? Don't come to San Francisco. Why? They ain't going to take care of you out here. That's not what you want to hear. And so watch out for that. I think that comes out somewhere closer towards the beginning of next year, near training camp. So a long ways to go, but put in the back of your head, and maybe we'll revisit that conversation when needed. But thank you guys so much for watching, listening. An hour and 40 minutes. Hopefully it wasn't too boring for you guys. If you guys can, like, share, and subscribe to the show. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on our way to 3,000 subscribers. Almost there. Would appreciate your help. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Again, follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. Use our promo code 49ersaccess at SeatGeek.com. 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Football tickets, I know it's over, but when it happens again, football tickets, NBA tickets, MLB tickets, concert tickets. You can get a $20 off your first purchase by using that promo code 49ersaccess. Okay, that's all I have for you today. We'll talk soon, I promise. But until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett. And as always, stay faithful.